The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just as Sarah Hayes was hanging the last of the laundry on the line behind the small ranch house, and something in the way it moved made her hands freeze on the damp cotton sheet. She had been watching horizons for 3 years now, ever since the day she had run from the plantation in Mississippi with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of desperate hope. The Emancipation Proclamation had freed her on paper in 1863, but Charles Hartwell had never acknowledged that particular piece of legislation, and by 1869 she had finally gathered the courage to claim the freedom that was rightfully hers. Now, in the spring of 1872, standing in the Montana Territory with the wind pulling at her skirts and the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance, she felt that old familiar dread creeping back into her bones. The rider was still too far away to make out clearly, but Sarah knew. She had always known this day might come. Her fingers trembled as she released the sheet and walked slowly toward the front of the property, where the ranch sprawled across the valley in all its modest glory. 50 head of cattle, a sturdy barn, a corral with 3 horses, and the house that John Brennan had built with his own 2 hands over the course of one long summer. It was not much by the standards of the wealthy ranchers who controlled thousands of acres, but it was honest, and it was good. And for the first time in her 24 years of life, Sarah had begun to feel like she might actually belong somewhere. John was out near the north pasture, checking on a section of fence that had come loose in the recent storms. She could see him in the distance, his tall frame bent over the posts, his dark hat shielding his face from the midday sun. Part of her wanted to run to him, to warn him, to prepare him for what was coming. But her feet carried her instead to the porch steps, where she sat down heavily and folded her hands in her lap, forcing herself to breathe slowly and evenly. Whatever happened next, she would face it. She had not come all this way to crumble now. The rider grew larger, and soon she could make out the details. A fine gray horse, expensive saddle, a man dressed in clothes that spoke of money and position. Behind him, 2 more riders followed at a distance, hired men by the look of them, rough and ready for whatever their employer required. Sarah's stomach twisted as the lead rider drew close enough for her to see his face, and yes, there he was, Charles Hartwell himself, looking older than she remembered but no less certain of his own authority. His pale blue eyes found her immediately, and a smile crossed his face that made her skin crawl. "Sarah," he called out as he reined his horse to a stop about 20 feet from the porch, "I have been searching for you for a very long time." She did not stand. She kept her hands folded, her back straight, her gaze level. "My name is Sarah Hayes," she said quietly. "I took my grandmother's maiden name when I came west. You have no business with me, Mr. Hartwell." He laughed, a sound without humor, and dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life on horseback. "No business? My dear girl, you are my property. You were born on my land, raised in my house, and you ran away like a thief in the night. I have come to bring you home." "I am not your property," Sarah said, and her voice was steadier than she felt. "The war ended that. The law ended that. I am a free woman." "The law," Hartwell said with contempt, and he took a step closer. "The law is what men with power say it is. And out here, so far from civilization, who do you think will enforce these laws you speak of? You belong to me, Sarah. You always have." That was when John came riding up fast from the north pasture, his horse kicking up clouds of dirt as he pushed the animal hard. Sarah saw him before Hartwell did, saw the way his jaw was set, and his eyes were fixed on the strangers at his property. And she knew with absolute certainty that he had seen them from a distance and come running. John Brennan was not a large man compared to some of the ranchers in the territory, but he was solid and strong from years of hard work, with broad shoulders and calloused hands and a quiet intensity that made people think twice before crossing him. He was 27 years old, a former Union soldier who had come west after the war to escape the memories of what he had seen and done, and he had hired Sarah 2 years ago to help with the house and the cooking after his mother had passed away from fever. They had been employer and employee at first, nothing more. But over the months, something had shifted between them. It had started with small kindnesses, with conversations over coffee in the early morning before the work began, with the way he listened when she spoke as if her words actually mattered. It had grown into something deeper when he had found her crying one night after a nightmare about her years in bondage, and instead of turning away or demanding she pull herself together, he had simply sat with her in the darkness and told her about his own nightmares from the war. They had not spoken of love, not in so many words, but Sarah knew what she felt when she looked at him, and she thought, she hoped, that he felt the same. Now he dismounted in one smooth motion and walked directly to the porch, positioning himself between Sarah and Hartwell without a word. He did not touch his gun, but his hand hung loose at his side, ready. "You are on my land," he said flatly. "State your business." Hartwell looked him up and down with obvious disdain. "Your land? This is open territory, boy. I am here to collect what belongs to me. That woman behind you is my property, and I intend to take her back to Mississippi where she belongs." "That woman," John said, and his voice was cold as winter ice, "is a free citizen of the United States, employed by me as housekeeper on this ranch. She is under my protection. You will leave now." "Your protection?" Hartwell's face darkened. "Do you have any idea who you are speaking to? I own one of the largest plantations in Mississippi. I have connections in Washington itself. What are you? A nobody with a patch of dirt and some cattle? Step aside, or I will have my men move you." John did not move. He stood perfectly still, his boots planted firmly on the ground, his eyes locked on Hartwell. "I served 4 years in the Union Army," he said quietly. "I fought at Antietam, at Gettysburg, at Petersburg. I fought so that men like you could not own people like her anymore. I did not survive all of that to stand aside now. You will leave my property, or I will remove you myself." The 2 hired men had dismounted and were standing behind Hartwell now, their hands on their weapons. Sarah felt her heart hammering in her chest. She stood up quickly, moving to John's side. "Please," she said, looking at Hartwell, "please just go. I will never come back with you. I would rather die than return to that life. There is nothing for you here." Hartwell's face twisted with anger. "You ungrateful little wretch. Do you know what I have spent searching for you, the time, the money, the effort? You were always my favorite, Sarah. I treated you better than any of the others. I gave you fine clothes, good food, a comfortable room. And this is how you repay me?" "You gave me nothing that was not already mine by right," Sarah said, and her voice shook but did not break. "You took everything from me, my freedom, my childhood, my dignity. You do not get to call yourself kind for not being as cruel as you could have been." "Enough," John said sharply. He shifted his stance slightly, and Sarah saw the way his right hand moved closer to the Colt revolver at his hip. "You have your answer. The lady has refused you. You are trespassing. Leave now, or this will end badly for you." Hartwell stared at him for a long moment, his face red with fury. Then he smiled again, that cold, calculating smile. "You think you are a hero, do you? A brave cowboy protecting the helpless woman? Let me tell you something, boy. In a few days I will return with the territorial marshal and proper documentation of ownership. I still have the bills of sale, the records from when her mother was purchased. The law may have changed, but the paperwork does not lie. She was born my property, and no piece of paper signed by a dead president changes that. The Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment both say otherwise, John replied. And I suspect the territorial marshal will agree with me, especially if I explain how you came onto my land making threats. We will see, Hartwell said. He turned and began walking back to his horse, but then paused and looked over his shoulder at Sarah. You were always stubborn. You got that from your mother. But she learned her place eventually, and so will you. One way or another, you are coming home with me." He mounted his horse, and the 3 men rode away slowly, deliberately, making it clear they were not retreating but simply postponing the confrontation. Sarah watched them go until they were nothing but dust on the horizon again, and only then did she allow herself to sag against the porch railing, her legs suddenly weak beneath her. John turned to her immediately, his hard expression softening. "Are you all right?" She nodded, then shook her head, then felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry. I should have told you. I should have warned you that he might come looking for me. I just thought, I hoped, that I'd gotten far enough away that he would never find me." "Hey," John said gently, and he reached out to touch her arm. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. That man has no right to you, no claim on you at all. You are free, Sarah. The law is clear." "The law," she said bitterly, wiping at her eyes. "He is right about one thing. Out here, the law is whatever powerful men say it is. What if he does come back with the marshal? What if he has documents that say I belong to him? What if they take me?" "They will not," John said firmly. "I will not let them." She looked up at him, this man who had shown her more kindness in 2 years than she had known in her entire life before. "You cannot fight the whole world for me, John. You heard him. He has money, connections, power. What do we have?" "We have the truth," John said, "and we have each other if you will have me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding for a different reason entirely. "What are you saying?" He took a deep breath, and she saw something vulnerable in his eyes, something raw and honest. "I am saying that I have been half in love with you since the day you told me off for tracking mud through the kitchen. I am saying that you are the bravest, strongest, most beautiful person I have ever known. I am saying that if you will have me, I want you to stay here not as my employee, but as my wife. Let me give you my name, my protection, everything I have. Let me stand between you and anyone who tries to take you away." Sarah felt as if the world had tilted beneath her feet. She had dreamed of this late at night when she allowed herself to hope, but she had never truly believed it could happen. "John, you do not have to do this. You do not have to marry me to protect me." "I know I do not have to," he said quietly. "I want to. I have wanted to ask you for months now, but I was afraid you would say no, afraid you would think I was taking advantage of my position as your employer, afraid I was not good enough for you. But when I saw that man on our land threatening you, I knew I could not wait any longer. Life is too short and too uncertain. So I am asking you now, Sarah Hayes, will you marry me?" She looked into his eyes and saw everything she had ever wanted reflected back at her. Safety, yes, but more than that, love, real, true, honest love, the kind she had read about in the few books she had managed to get her hands on over the years, but never thought she would experience herself. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Sarah buried her face in his shoulder and let herself believe, just for a moment, that everything might actually be all right. But that moment of peace did not last long. They spent the rest of the day preparing, talking through their options, making plans. John rode into town the next morning to the small settlement of Cedar Falls, about 5 miles south of the ranch. The town was hardly more than a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, and a handful of houses. But it had a justice of the peace and a telegraph office, and that was what they needed. John found Justice Harmon in his office above the general store, a balding man in his 50s who had been appointed to the position 3 years earlier and took his duties seriously. John explained the situation quickly and clearly, leaving nothing out. Harmon listened with a grave expression, then nodded slowly. "I can marry you today if you like," he said. "Get the paperwork filed immediately. As your legal husband, you would have even more standing to protect her from any claims this Hartwell might make. And the truth is, his claims are baseless. The law is crystal clear. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery throughout the United States. Any documentation he has proving prior ownership is now worthless. No court in the country would uphold it." "But what if he has friends in the territorial government?" John asked. "What if he bribes the marshal?" Harmon's expression hardened. Then we make sure the marshal knows that this community will not tolerate such corruption. I will send telegrams to the territorial governor and to the federal authorities in Washington. I will make this case visible enough that no one can sweep it under the rug. Your Miss Hayes is not alone in this, Mr. Brennan. She has the law on her side, and she has people willing to fight for that law." Relief flooded through John. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." "Bring her to town tomorrow morning," Harmon said. "We will conduct the ceremony and get everything properly documented. In the meantime, I will start sending those telegrams. If Hartwell shows his face in Cedar Falls, he will find a very unfriendly reception." John rode back to the ranch with hope burning bright in his chest. He found Sarah in the kitchen, preparing dinner, though her hands were shaking as she worked. He told her everything Harmon had said, and he watched as some of the fear lifted from her eyes. "Tomorrow?" she said softly. "We are getting married tomorrow?" "If you still want to," John said, suddenly uncertain. "I know this is all happening very fast. If you need more time—" "No," Sarah interrupted. "No, I do not need more time. I want to be your wife, John Brennan. I want that more than I have ever wanted anything." The next morning they rode into Cedar Falls together, Sarah wearing the best dress she owned, a simple blue cotton that she had made herself. John wore his cleanest shirt and his good vest, and he had shaved carefully that morning, wanting to look his best for her. They were both nervous, hands fidgeting, barely speaking on the ride into town. But when they looked at each other, there was so much warmth in their eyes that words seemed unnecessary. Justice Harmon was waiting for them at the church, along with the pastor, Reverend Michaels, and 2 witnesses from the town, the blacksmith Tom Granger and his wife Martha. It was a small gathering, nothing like the grand weddings that happened back east. But as Sarah stood beside John and listened to the words of the ceremony, she felt a joy so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "Do you, John Brennan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," John said clearly, his hand gripping Sarah's with gentle firmness. "And do you, Sarah Hayes, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Then, by the power vested in me by the Montana Territory and the United States of America, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Brennan." John turned to her, his eyes searching hers for permission, and Sarah smiled and nodded. He kissed her softly, sweetly, a kiss full of promise and hope. And when they pulled apart, Sarah saw that his eyes were wet with tears too. They signed the marriage certificate right there in the church, with Justice Harmon and the witnesses adding their signatures as well. Harmon made copies of everything, explaining that he would file one set with the territorial government and keep another set in his own records. "No one can challenge this marriage," he said firmly. "It is legal and binding in every way. You are Mrs. Sarah Brennan now, and that is a matter of public record." Martha Granger hugged Sarah tightly as they left the church. "Welcome to Cedar Falls, honey," she said warmly. "You ever need anything, you just come find me. We take care of our own here." The kindness in her voice made Sarah's throat tighten with gratitude. She had spent so many years feeling alone, feeling like she did not belong anywhere. And now suddenly she had a husband and a community and a future. It felt almost too good to be true, but the shadow of Charles Hartwell still loomed over them. 3 days after the wedding, he returned, and this time he had the territorial marshal with him, just as he had promised. Sarah and John were working together in the garden when they saw the riders approaching, and John immediately straightened, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. "Stay behind me," he said quietly to Sarah, but she shook her head. "No, we face this together." They walked to the front of the house side by side, hands clasped tightly together. Hartwell was there, looking smug and satisfied, and beside him rode a tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest. Marshal Thomas Wade was known throughout the territory as a fair man, but also a practical one, someone who understood the realities of frontier justice. He dismounted and tipped his hat politely to them both. "Mr. Brennan, Miss—" He paused, glancing at a paper in his hand. "Or I suppose it is Mrs. Brennan now. I am Marshal Wade. I have received a complaint from Mr. Hartwell here regarding a woman named Sarah, who he claims is his legal property, and who he alleges is being harbored on this ranch against his rights. I am here to investigate the matter." "There is nothing to investigate, John said firmly. "My wife is a free woman. As guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Hartwell has no legal claim to her whatsoever." Hartwell stepped forward, pulling documents from his saddlebag. "I have the bill of sale for her mother, dated 1845. I have the birth records showing that Sarah was born on my plantation in 1848. Under the laws that existed at that time, she was my property from birth. The fact that certain political changes have occurred does not erase that history or my investment in her upbringing." Marshal Wade took the documents and examined them carefully. Sarah felt her heart sinking as she watched him read, saw his brow furrow in concentration. But then he looked up, and his expression was not sympathetic to Hartwell at all. "Mr. Hartwell, I understand that you have traveled a long way and gone to considerable expense to pursue this matter. But I have to tell you, these documents are not worth the paper they are written on anymore. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery throughout the United States. That amendment was ratified in 1865, 7 years ago. Since that time, no person can be held as property in this country, regardless of what historical documents might say about their status before the amendment." "But my rights!" Hartwell began angrily. "Your rights ended when the Constitution changed," Wade interrupted. "I'm sorry if that is financially inconvenient for you, but that is the law. This woman is free. She has married Mr. Brennan here in a legal ceremony. She is a citizen with full legal standing. You have no claim on her, and if you continue to harass her or her husband, I will arrest you for trespassing and making threats." Hartwell's face went purple with rage. "This is an outrage. Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what kind of trouble I can make for you?" "I know exactly who you are," Wade said calmly, "and I know that you are a man who has not accepted that the world has changed. But it has changed, sir, whether you like it or not. The Union won the war. Slavery is over, and if you cannot accept that, then I suggest you return to Mississippi and stay there, because you will find no sympathy for your views in this territory." For a long moment, Hartwell simply stared at the marshal, his chest heaving with fury. Then he turned his glare on Sarah, and the hatred in his eyes made her shiver. "You will regret this," he said softly. "You could have come back with me willingly. You could have had an easy life. But you have chosen to humiliate me, to throw my generosity back in my face. You will regret it, Sarah. I promise you that." "The only thing I regret," Sarah said, her voice shaking but clear, "is that I did not run sooner. You never owned me, Mr. Hartwell. You never owned any of us. We were human beings, not livestock. And the fact that you still cannot see that proves exactly what kind of man you are." Hartwell looked as if he might explode. He took a step toward her, his hand raised. But John moved faster. He stepped directly into Hartwell's path, his body a solid wall between the former plantation owner and Sarah, and he did not move an inch. "Touch her, and you are a dead man," John said quietly, and there was such conviction in his voice that Hartwell actually stumbled backward. Marshal Wade moved quickly to intervene, stepping between the two men. "That is enough. Mr. Hartwell, you are leaving now. Get on your horse and ride out of this territory. If I see you or hear of you bothering these people again, I will arrest you. Do I make myself clear?" Hartwell's jaw worked furiously, but he finally nodded stiffly. He mounted his horse, yanking hard on the reins, and looked down at them all with pure venom. "This is not over," he said. Then he spurred his horse and rode away at a gallop, his hired men scrambling to follow. Marshal Wade watched him go, then turned back to John and Sarah. "I do not think he will be back," he said. "Men like that are bullies. They are used to getting their way through intimidation. But when someone stands up to them, when the law stands against them, they usually fold. He has no legal recourse here, and he knows it." My guess is he will return to Mississippi and try to salvage what is left of his plantation, which from what I understand is not much these days. Thank you, Marshal, John said, shaking the man's hand. Thank you for upholding the law. It is my job, Wade said simply, and it is the right thing to do. Congratulations on your marriage, by the way. I hope you will both be very happy here. After the marshal left, Sarah and John stood together in the yard, holding each other tightly. Sarah was shaking, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally catching up with her. Is it really over? She whispered. Is he really gone? He is really gone, John said, pressing his lips to her forehead. You are safe now, Sarah. You are my wife. You are a free woman, and you are safe. She tilted her head back to look at him, and the love she saw in his eyes made her heart feel like it might burst. I love you, she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I love you so much, John Brennan. I love you too, he said, and kissed her deeply, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and John's eyes had darkened with desire. Come inside, he said softly. Let me show you exactly how much. They went into the house together, into the bedroom that was now theirs to share, and they made love for the first time as husband and wife. It was tender and passionate and perfect, and afterward, as they lay tangled together in the sheets, Sarah felt a peace she had never known before. She was home. She was loved. She was free. The next few months were the happiest of Sarah's life. She and John fell into an easy rhythm, working the ranch together, building their life side by side. She took over the management of the house completely, cooking and cleaning and making their small home feel warm and welcoming. But she also worked outside with the cattle, learning to rope and brand and handle the animals with increasing skill. John taught her to ride properly, and she discovered that she loved the feeling of being on horseback, loved the sense of freedom and power it gave her. The people of Cedar Falls welcomed her warmly. Martha Granger became a close friend, visiting often and teaching Sarah how to sew more intricate patterns and how to make preserves from the wild berries that grew in the mountains. The pastor's wife, Ellen Michaels, invited Sarah to join the church's women's group, and though Sarah was nervous at first, afraid of being judged or rejected, she found only kindness and acceptance there. Not everyone was so welcoming, of course. There were a few families in the area who made their disapproval of Sarah's presence known, who whispered behind their hands or crossed the street to avoid speaking to her. But John faced down anyone who dared to insult his wife, and soon enough most people learned to keep their bigotry to themselves. One evening in late summer, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset behind the mountains, Sarah realized that something had changed in her body. She had missed her monthly courses and her breasts were tender, and she felt a strange fluttering in her stomach that was both exciting and terrifying. She turned to John, taking his hand. I think I might be with child, she said quietly. John's eyes went wide, and for a moment he just stared at her. Then a slow, wondering smile spread across his face. Truly? You think so? I think so, she said. I am not certain yet, but all the signs are there. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. Sarah, that is the most wonderful news. Are you happy? She asked, suddenly uncertain. I know we have not talked about children yet. I know this is happening fast. Happy? He said, pulling back to look at her with shining eyes. I am thrilled. I cannot think of anything I want more than to have a family with you. The doctor from the next town over confirmed it a few weeks later. Sarah was indeed pregnant, about 3 months along by his estimation, and the baby would likely arrive sometime in early spring. Sarah was overwhelmed with joy and fear in equal measure. She had seen women die in childbirth, had known the dangers, but she was also filled with a fierce determination to bring this baby into the world safely, to give her child all the love and freedom that she herself had been denied for so long. As fall turned to winter, Sarah's belly began to swell, and she felt the baby moving inside her, little kicks and flutters that made her laugh with delight. John was endlessly attentive, worrying over her constantly, making sure she did not work too hard or lift anything heavy. He built a cradle for the baby, working on it every evening by lamplight, carving intricate patterns into the wood with painstaking care. Christmas came, and they spent it quietly together, exchanging simple gifts. Sarah had knitted John a warm scarf, and he had bought her a beautiful leather-bound journal from the general store, along with a pen and ink. "For writing down your thoughts," he said, "and maybe someday for writing down your story. What you survived, what you overcame. Our children should know where they came from, should understand the strength of their mother." Sarah cried when she opened it, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. She had never owned anything so fine, and the idea that her story might be worth recording, worth passing down, was almost too much to comprehend. Winter was hard in Montana, with deep snows and bitter cold, but their small house was snug and warm, and they had plenty of supplies laid in. They spent the long evenings reading together by the fire, talking about the future, making plans. They wanted more children, they decided, a whole house full of them if they were blessed. They wanted to expand the ranch, maybe hire some help, build a bigger house someday. "I want our children to grow up knowing that they can be anything," Sarah said one night, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "I want them to never know what it feels like to be owned, to be powerless. I want them to be free in a way that I never was, not until I met you." "They will be," John promised. "We will make sure of it. And they will know how brave their mother is, how strong. They will be so proud of you, Sarah." In March, when the snow was finally beginning to melt and the first hints of spring were appearing in the valley, Sarah went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when John feared he might lose her. But Martha Granger was there, helping, guiding Sarah through it. And finally, just as dawn was breaking, the baby emerged into the world with a loud, healthy cry. "It is a boy," Martha announced, holding up the squalling infant, "a beautiful, perfect baby boy." Sarah sobbed with relief and joy as Martha placed the baby in her arms. He was tiny and red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same warm brown as Sarah's own. John sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, staring down at their son with wonder. "He is perfect," John whispered. "Sarah, he is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Sarah asked, looking up at her husband. John thought for a moment, then smiled. "What about Samuel, after my father? He was a good man, fought for the Union, believed in doing what was right even when it was hard. I would like our son to carry his name." "Samuel," Sarah repeated, testing it out. "Samuel Brennan. I love it." Baby Samuel was a good child, healthy and strong, and he brought even more joy into their lives than they had imagined possible. John was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with the baby in the middle of the night when Samuel would not sleep, singing off-key lullabies that made Sarah laugh. She had never seen a man so hands-on with his child, and it made her love him even more. As Samuel grew, the ranch prospered. They were able to buy more cattle, and John hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Sarah managed the household and cared for Samuel, but she also kept the ranch's books, handled the correspondence with buyers, and proved to have a sharp head for business. Together, she and John made a formidable team. When Samuel was 2 years old, Sarah found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and the birth, while still difficult, went much faster. They welcomed a daughter into the world, a tiny girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. They named her Rose, after the wild roses that grew along the edge of their property every summer. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic boy who loved helping his father with the cattle and begging his mother for stories. Rose was quieter but no less determined, following her older brother everywhere and refusing to be left out of anything. When Samuel was 6 and Rose was 4, Sarah gave birth to another son, Thomas, And then 2 years after that, twin girls, Rebecca and Ruth. Their house was full of noise and laughter and love. And Sarah sometimes had to pinch herself to believe it was real. She thought often of her mother, who had died when Sarah was only 12, worked to death in the fields of Hartwell's plantation. She wished her mother could have seen this, could have known that Sarah had escaped, had found freedom and love and built a beautiful life. She told her children about their grandmother, made sure they knew the story of where they came from and what their mother had survived. John proved to be an excellent father to all their children, patient and loving and fair. He taught the boys to ride and rope and shoot, but he taught the girls the same skills, believing firmly that all his children should know how to handle themselves in the world. Sarah taught them all to read and write and do arithmetic, using the small collection of books they had accumulated and the lessons she had secretly learned from the plantation owner's children when she was young. Cedar Falls grew over the years, expanding from a small settlement into a proper town with a schoolhouse and a doctor's office and even a small bank. The Brennan family became respected members of the community. John served on the town council, and Sarah helped organize fundraisers for the church and the school. Not everyone accepted them, even after all those years. There were still those who looked at Sarah and saw only her race, who whispered about the impropriety of her marriage to John. But their friends outnumbered their detractors, and the Brennans had built a life too strong to be shaken by small-minded prejudice. In the spring of 1885, when Sarah was 37 years old and their youngest children were 10, a stranger rode up to their ranch. Sarah was in the garden with Rose and the twins planting the year's vegetables, and she felt that old familiar fear grip her heart when she saw the rider approaching. But then the man called out a greeting, and she realized he was too young to be Hartwell, too friendly in his manner. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "I'm looking for Mrs. Sarah Brennan. Would that be you?" "It would," Sarah said cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron. "What can I do for you?" "My name is James Porter. I am a lawyer from Boston. I have been searching for you for some time, Mrs. Brennan. I represent the estate of a Mr. Charles Hartwell, who passed away last year." Sarah felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. "He is dead?" "Yes, ma'am. He died of heart failure in his home in Mississippi, and in his will, he left a letter addressed to you. I have been instructed to deliver it personally into your hands." With shaking fingers, Sarah took the envelope he offered. It was thick and sealed with wax, her name written across the front in handwriting she recognized. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at the lawyer. "Did you read this?" "No, ma'am. I was instructed simply to deliver it to you. What you do with it is your own business." After the lawyer left, Sarah sat on the porch steps, holding the letter and staring at it. John came out of the barn and saw her there, saw the expression on her face, and hurried over. "What is it? What has happened?" "Hartwell is dead," she said. "He left me a letter." John sat down beside her, taking her hand. "Do you want to open it?" "I do not know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to burn it without reading it, but part of me needs to know what he had to say." "Then open it," John said gently. "I am right here with you." She broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the pages. The handwriting was shaky, the writing of a man in failing health, but the words were clear enough. "Sarah, if you are reading this, then I am dead, and you have outlived me. I suppose you must find that satisfying after everything that passed between us. I have spent the last 13 years of my life thinking about the day I came to Montana to bring you back, thinking about the way you looked at me with such hatred, the way that cowboy stood between us and would not move. I was so angry at you, Sarah. I was angry for years, angry that you had run, angry that you had defied me, angry that the world I knew had crumbled and I could not put it back together. I spent a fortune trying to rebuild the plantation after the war, trying to hold on to the old ways, but it was pointless. Everything had changed. The people I had kept in bondage were gone. The money was gone. The power was gone. I lost everything, Sarah. I died a bitter, lonely old man in a house falling down around me, And in these final days, as I feel my life slipping away, I have finally allowed myself to admit something that I should have acknowledged long ago. You were right. You were. You were right about everything. I did not own you. I never owned you. You were a human being, a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams of your own, and I treated you as property. I told myself I was kind, that I was better than other masters, but kindness in the service of cruelty is not kindness at all. It is just cruelty with a softer face. I am sorry, Sarah. I am sorry for what I did to you, to your mother, to all the others. I am sorry that it has taken me until the very end of my life to see the truth. I know this apology means nothing. I know it cannot undo the harm I caused, but I needed to write it down, needed you to know that I finally understood. I hope you have been happy in Montana with your cowboy. I hope you have lived the free life that should have been yours from the beginning. I hope you have found peace. Hartwell Sarah read the letter twice, then a third time, and then she sat staring at the paper as tears rolled down her cheeks. John put his arm around her, holding her close. Are those tears of sadness or something else? He asked softly. I do not know, Sarah whispered. Both, maybe. I never thought I would hear him admit he was wrong. I never thought he would apologize. It does not change anything. It does not fix what he did, but it matters somehow. It matters that he finally understood. What do you want to do with it? John asked. Sarah thought about it for a long moment, then stood up. She walked to the stove in the kitchen, opened the iron door, and fed the letter into the flames. She watched it burn, watched the words turn to ash, and felt something heavy lift from her shoulders. He does not get to live in my head anymore, she said firmly. He does not get to take up space in my heart. I am free of him, John, truly, completely free. John smiled and pulled her into his arms. You always were free, Sarah. From the moment you ran from that plantation, you claimed your freedom. Everything else was just the world catching up to who you already were. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table with all 5 of their children, Samuel, now a strapping young man of 16, Rose, a beautiful girl of 14, Thomas, a lively 12-year-old, and the twins chattering away at 10 years old, Sarah looked around at the family she and John had built and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had survived the unthinkable. She had escaped bondage, crossed a continent, faced down the man who had tried to reclaim her, and built a life filled with love and purpose. Mama, why are you crying? Rebecca asked, noticing the tears on Sarah's cheeks. Because I am happy, sweetheart, Sarah said, reaching out to touch her daughter's face. Because I am so very, very happy. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as all years do. John's hair turned gray, and Sarah's face gained lines, but their love never wavered. They celebrated 25 years of marriage with a big party that brought together everyone from Cedar Falls and the surrounding ranches. Their children grew up and started lives of their own. Samuel married a local girl and took over the running of the ranch, allowing John and Sarah to finally slow down a bit. Rose went east to attend a women's college, becoming a teacher and then a writer, publishing essays about justice and equality that made her mother so proud. Thomas became a lawyer, fighting for the rights of those who had no voice. The twins married brothers from a neighboring ranch and stayed close to home, giving Sarah and John a house full of grandchildren to dote on. In 1902, on a warm summer evening, John and Sarah sat together on the porch of the house he had built all those years ago. They were both in their 50s now, their bodies bearing the marks of a life of hard work, but their hands were still clasped tightly together the way they had been on the day they married. Do you ever regret it? John asked softly. Marrying me, staying here, building this life? Sarah turned to him, her eyes full of love and certainty. Not for one single moment. You gave me everything, John. You gave me freedom, safety, love, a family, a home. You stood between me and the man who tried to take it all away, and you never moved. You have been the best husband, the best father, the best man I have ever known. How could I possibly regret any of it? He smiled and leaned in to kiss her. his lips still soft and warm against hers. "I am the lucky one," he said. "You made my life worth living, Sarah. You and our children, the family we built together. That is everything that matters." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Around them, the ranch sprawled out in all directions, prosperous and thriving, a testament to everything they had accomplished together. Inside the house, they could hear the voices of their grandchildren playing, the next generation of Brennans growing up free and strong and loved. Sarah thought about the frightened young woman she had been, running through the night with nothing but hope to sustain her. She thought about the long journey west, the fear and uncertainty, the moment she had first seen John Brennan and felt something shift in her heart. She thought about the day Hartwell had come for her, and the way John had stood like a wall between them, refusing to move, refusing to let anyone take her away. She thought about the life they had built together, stone by stone, day by day, year by year. It had not always been easy. There had been hard times and heartbreak along the way, but through it all, they had had each other, and that had been enough. "I love you," she whispered to John, squeezing his hand. "I love you too," he replied, his voice warm and steady and true. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah Brennan closed her eyes and smiled, knowing without a doubt that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with exactly who she was supposed to be with, living the life she had always deserved. She was free, she was loved, she was home, and nothing in this world could ever take that away from her again.